por favor, en cabinas y comenzamos con la proyección del video.
Por amor a la fotografía.
México Street Photo Fest, el Festival Internacional de Fotografía de Calle en México.
Wall, Head-On Photo Festival, Pisa Street Photography International Festival, Brussels Street Photography Festival, Teherán Street Photography Festival. También ha curado diversas exposiciones como Exposed en el Head-On Photo Festival en Sydney 2019, Two Way Street en San Francisco, Double Trouble en Head-On, Double Exposed en Indian Photo Festival y Head-On, Wall of Woman by Woman en el Ballard Photo Bienal. Julia organiza talleres y aventuras de fotografía callejera tanto a nivel internacional como en Australia. Un aplauso, por favor, para Julia.
Thank you. And I'm very pleased to be here. As I said last night, these gatherings are really important because we share our love of street photography. So today I'm doing a talk that I haven't done before, so you'll have to excuse me if I have some glitches. It's quite personal, and it's about me and my story of street photography. So I've called it Finding Yourself Through the Joy of Street Photography. Okay, and Jorge touched on this a little bit in his talk. So who are we? Why do we photograph specific things? Why do we photograph in a particular way? Can we find ourselves through street photography? So this is what I'm going to explore, and how who we are influences what, why, and how we photograph, and how we can find ourselves and embrace who we are through street photography. If I have time, I'll also look at how where we photograph influences our work and the environments in which we photograph. So I'll explore these ideas through my own story, talking about myself, which I don't usually do. So I'm a little bit anxious about it. But as I talk about myself, think about your stories. No doubt there'll be a lot of similarities. Okay, so who am I? Who are we? We are the product of our genetics, our gender, our formative childhood years, the culture and community in which we live, our socioeconomic backgrounds, our values that stem from those things, our life experiences, as well as our emotional connections. These things all shape who we are and influence how we see photographically. Theories of design, which no doubt you all know a little bit about, such as Gestalt principles, explain how we organize visual information, how brains naturally seek patterns, balance, and order. These principles are universal since we all process visuals similarly. However, what we choose to photograph is deeply personal, and it's connected to who we are. So, for example, two photographers might notice the same compositional elements, but only one will capture it while the other walks past. And it's a classic example when you are out photographing with other photographers, they will photograph things that you don't find interesting. So my partner, Jerry, is also a street photographer, and he will find something really funny and interesting in something that we see in the street, and I'll just dismiss it. It just doesn't interest me. So we all, and you'll see that every time that you're walking with someone, and you will also notice a difference in how you photograph a particular thing. We all see things quite differently, and it all relates to who we are as individuals. So I want to talk a little bit more about me and my life story. So once upon a time, in a land far away, right down underneath, in a little town called Narromine, there's the hospital. I was born, and I grew up on a farm in Australia. That's what the farm looks like now, but when I was a kid, it was very basic. And that's me on the trampoline in front of our little house. So it was quite a remote area where I grew up. And so at the age of, just a minute, one more thing. So I was a little girl in Australia, and despite all the dangerous things along the way, because as you all know, we have a lot of dangerous things in Australia, and that's why you will never come to visit me, right? But I survived, and she finally grew up and became who she is today. But along the way, there have been some pivotal moments, and I've made a little list. And these pivotal moments in my life have shaped me as an individual. So as a kid, I grew up really on a country farm. It was in the 60s. I had my own horse, riding horses, motorbikes, and I spent a long time on my own, and I was quite a shy kid. I had an older brother and a much younger sister. So that's me, and it's really overexposed, sorry. My brother and my mum and dad. And my dad was a very good fisherman, as well as a farmer. So some pivotal moments. I used to love going fishing, and I was a tomboy, complete tomboy, and we had all the men and the sons used to go on fishing trips, and I really wanted to go on the fishing trip. And I said to Dad, why can't I go on the fishing trip? And he said, because you're a girl. And so I remember that, it really sticks with me. Also, I really wanted to be a Boy Scout, but I couldn't be a Boy Scout because I was a girl. At the age of 12, because I grew up on a farm in Australia, a lot of farmers who can afford it will send their kids to boarding schools. So I went to a boarding school at the age of 12 and was there for 6 years. So that taught me independence. Also, the headmistress was a closet lesbian. This was in the early 70s, early mid-70s. And I remember she was a feminist at the time, and which was quite rare. And she told us in assembly one day that girls could do anything, And so that's really stuck with me as well. So after school, I went to university. I was finally released from boarding school, and I went crazy like we all do at university. But I fell in love with the first person that I met, and then married that person at the age of 22. And we lived in Asia and traveled around for a while. And that was, so just in terms of photography, I started taking photos early on as a kid. So I had a Polaroid camera. This is one of my early photographs at the age of, I don't know, 12 or something. So I took photos when we traveled through Asia, then came back and I studied landscape architecture and design, and that's been a big influence on my work, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Then I had 3 kids. These are my kids back in the 2000s. And we lived in the US for a while. And at the time, I was president of the PTA, believe it or not. And then in the mid-2000s, I went through a divorce and found that I needed a partner who would see me for who I was, and met Jerry. So when I met Jerry around that time, he's also a photographer, and my teenage son was taking photos at the same time. So that sort of sparked my interest in photography, and I got my first iPhone around the time and started taking candid shots of people. And we both embraced photography as a hobby and started traveling again. And then I discovered that I was actually pretty good at it. And in 2017, I got involved with Women in Street. And so the story goes. And now I have a granddaughter. That's my grandchild. So added to all these life experiences, my background, cultural influences, there are other things about me that influence and have influenced my photography. So my height, for example, my shyness and lack of confidence, and now my age. So what is about me, based on who I am, that influences how and what I photograph, the way that I see? So let's explore this some more. And this has been an interesting process for me, trying to sort of decipher how I see and what it is about me and my history, my background, that comes out in my photos. So so it's really it's difficult for me, as I'm not an emotionally really deep person, so I have to really sort of draw deep. So like all of us here, I'm drawn to street photography and the candid nature of it because I want to photograph people. I'm fascinated by people and human behavior. So we all have that in common. I'm particularly drawn to people's faces, hands, and the way they use their hands, their interactions, emotional connections, human flesh, and all its irregularities and variations. So I want to capture that richness, emotion, and rawness of humanity. So this was one of the first photos that I took at the pool. The pool is a place that is just 10 minutes from where I live. And this was sort of the birth of that particular pool project. So in trying to find out more about who I am and how you can see me in my photographs, I had to sort of have a look at how I photograph over time. So these are some of my very early photos. And yes, I took photos in black and white. So these are all photos that I took before I really had taken any workshops. So already early on, I was experimenting with perspective and different point of views and flash. This is when I got an X70. So the previous photos were taken with a little Olympus, and this was taken with an X70, which is a very small Fuji camera, which unfortunately they don't make anymore. And I realized that people didn't actually see me when I was taking photos of them at the pool. I went to Myanmar, and they have some really interesting t-shirts, and they don't understand English at all, really. So this was in 2017. Early 2017, I took a workshop with Maciej Dakowicz. So these are from that workshop. So you'll notice that these are quite different to the photos that I take now. This was an early pool photo. Maciej was really into separation. So this is after Maciej's workshop. In connections. This was the day I met Debrani Das in late 2017 in India. And then back home, I sort of started getting really hooked on taking photos from different points of view and layering. So this is kind of the point that I started to do much more of that, and starting to get closer and closer to people. Back in India, this time with doing a workshop with Vineet Bobra. Trying to get really, really close. Layering and trying to tell a story. Japan. This is back in Australia. So these photos are kind of all over the place, and they're not sequenced visually. They're sequenced chronologically to sort of give you more of an idea of how I've changed photographically over time. So this is when I started to get right into the scene. And my photos started to become more complex. So this is 2019, and then COVID hit, and as you heard from Jimena, this is when we had to change completely photographically and try and explore other things. The pool was really quiet. So this is my COVID experience, which was a little bit different to Jimena's, because we could still go out and go down to the pool, for example. So most of my photos from that time are from the pool. And starting to really experiment with playing around with perspective. And then in 2021, Jerry and I went on a road trip. So it was still, Australia was still cut off from the rest of the world. And we went to this is in the outback Australia, and then agricultural shows in North Queensland. And I experimented a lot with film around that time as well. Have a panoramic film camera. And then back to travel, yay, in 2022. So this is Indonesia and Istanbul. Getting closer and closer. India. So just being able to get back and travel and start exploring the world and really embracing photography again and changing my style so that my photos become sort of more intense and complex. This is back in Australia at Summer Nats, which is like a car show. Perth. Sydney. In Australia, we don't, it's hard to find that buzz that you get, say, in Mexico City. It's hard to find crowds, for example. So you have to go to events to get that concentration of people. Indonesia again. Istanbul. India. Egypt. Back in India, this was in 2023. Starting to really play around now with flash. This is flash and high density filter and slow shutter speed. I wanted to get the sense of being in a crowd. Kolkata. Back home at Mardi Gras. This photo actually was supposed to be in Eyes on Main Street this next year, but they had to, I got an email recently from Jerome, who organises it, and they had to remove this photo because you can't really see it, but when it's blown up at that size, which they print at that size, there's some naked breasts, so they had to call this Wilson, where the Eyes on Main Street is held, is quite conservative. This is Flash. This is a photo that I'm really proud of because it's really complex, and now I strive to get that complexity in my images. Tokyo, Japan, Italy. This is all last year. Naples, Istanbul, back home, Japan this year. These are just recent photos that I took just back in August. So I'm pleased with this photo too, because there's so much going on and so much layering. And Vietnam, Alexandria in Egypt, Cairo, and Morocco. Okay, so that just gives you a sense of how my images have changed over time. And yes, they have improved, I hope. And my style has changed, as well as the situations in which I photograph. But what and who I photographed hasn't really changed. There are quiet, reflective moments, chaotic and tense moments, as well as funny moments. And what I photograph is quite varied, and perhaps that gives an insight into who I am. Why am I drawn to these particular things, and what does that say about me? So people who photograph others do so because they're drawn to them. But for me personally, I enjoy that sense of being close to people, sometimes quite intensely, and perhaps it has ties back to my childhood, when I was on my own a lot, or to my failed marriage. So I didn't get that closeness that I needed in my first marriage. But I do now. I can also be a little melancholy and reflective at times. So perhaps that's based on past experiences from my childhood. But I also have a bit of an odd sense of humour, and maybe that's genetics, similar to my dad. But it's not quite that simple, because as individuals, we're really complex beings, and how we see photographically can't easily be unraveled. But it's something that I want you all to reflect on and try and dig deep to sort of try and work out why you personally take photos of particular things. But what can be more easily explained is the change in how I photograph. So I've always enjoyed photographing up close, but over time my photos have become more intense and more complex, and I seek out crowded, more chaotic places so that I can create those more complex images and order that chaos at the same time through layering. I love that sense of losing myself completely in the chaos. Thanks, but I'm not finished yet. Okay, so why do I now photograph in this way? What does that say about me, and why has that changed? So it's got to do with a number of things. And you can probably all relate to this. I've grown more confident as a photographer and as a person. Knowing that I'm good at something has given me that confidence. I've realized that my size and age are actually an asset, not a disadvantage, and I've learned to embrace that. Confidence also means I care less about what other things, and I'm free, what others think about what I do, and I'm free to do as I like. Also, I've learned from other photographers, and we've all learned from each other. But also, as I said, I love and have learned to embrace that feeling of losing myself in a crowd and to completely disappear and become invisible. And I have a special power of being invisible. I took this in Sydney just recently, and just shows you a little bit about the way that I work. This is on Sydney streets, so they're not very crowded. But it just shows you how close I get. So I'm using a 28mm lens. So can you see me? So you can see how close I get, and people just don't really pay attention. Thanks, but I still haven't finished. Okay, so that power of being invisible and also being a woman means that I can photograph in particular places and particular things like kids. So the pool, for example, I can photograph at the pool where most men can't go. So another special power. So this really is my happy place. It's just close to where I live. Unfortunately, the last few years we've had terrible wet summers, and so I haven't taken as many photos down there in the last probably 2 or 3 years. But I will still go there every day, almost, when I'm at home. As I've grown as a photographer and as a person, I've gained the experience to, the confidence to experiment more. So, for example, playing with perspective, you will have noticed that through my work, I occasionally play with perspective to create a sense of weirdness and to challenge the viewer. Where does this come from? I think it comes from my design background. I had a lecturer who really pushed us in terms of design to think creatively, and that was in the early 1990s, and that his approach always really resonates with me. He just stays with me when I'm photographing. I mean, the guy's a bit of a weirdo, but still, what he taught me stays with me. So just trying to see things from a different angle, different perspective. And I have a little underwater camera that I take down to the pool, and actually I've been using that a lot more lately. I just really love the effect that it gives, and a lot of Australian female photographers, you'll see some of their work, like Snappy Lapper. We've sort of embraced these little underwater cameras. And then flash, I do a lot more flash now. So I was very fortunate to get a gig at a Fred Again concert early last year. So these are flash photos from that. Thank you. So I just want to finish up by saying, talking a little bit about where we photograph, how that influences our work and the different environments, physical and cultural, in which we photograph. It affects the way our images look. So light varies depending on air quality and the surrounding physical environment. It can change the way our photos look in terms of colour and mood. The way people in different countries respond to us as photographers can affect how and what we photograph. Are we able to get close, or do we have to maintain a distance? And access can also impact how and what we photograph. So these are just some examples of photos that I've taken in different places, and you can see in terms of the light and the physical environment, how that affects the way images look. So this is at home in Australia, where we have really quite harsh light and brings out the colours brilliantly. Then this is in India, but it's in Rajasthan, where the air is quite clear, so you still get those similar bright colours. This is in Amritsar, so it's got quite a different look in the way the light affects the colours. So it's much more sort of grey and hazy. This is in Mumbai, it's similar, where the light is there's a lot more smog in the atmosphere, so it gives you that sort of grey-brown colour. Same with this. Singapore, where it's cloudy and grey a lot of the time. Istanbul, a lot of us have experienced the beautiful light, that sort of soft, bluey grey light in Istanbul. And this is in Israel at the Dead Sea. And again, it's a different kind of light because it's so, it's desert and sort of dusty. And in Cairo, it's really, really dusty and golden brown. So you get this sort of golden brown light. Cultural environments, different cultural environments really impact the way our photos look. So in places like Egypt and Morocco, you can't get quite as close to people, and they're much more wary of you as photographers. It's in Cairo. This is in Morocco. So this is a photo that I just took recently, and people tell you that Morocco is quite difficult to photograph in because people are so wary of photographers. So you sort of maintain a bit more of a distance. And you pretend to photograph cats. And yeah, I had a bit of a bad run-in with a cat in Egypt, and I had to have a whole series of rabies vaccinations. But I still got up close to that one. And then India, where probably some of you have been to India and experienced photographing in India. It's much easier to get close because people don't mind you photographing them. The difficult thing is to photograph them candidly. So because they want their photos taken so badly. So you have to try and you have to try different techniques to photograph them in a candid way so that they're not smiling and doing this at you. This is Egypt. Istanbul is a great place to photograph because they don't mind being photographed as much either. And there's a place in Istanbul I love to go to photograph where I could just really immerse myself in a crowd. And obviously, this woman had no problem. Then at home, it's a completely different environment again. As I said, I have to go to events to photograph, and people are a little bit more wary of you photographing there as well. Mardi Gras is easy to photograph at. And then I recently was in Japan, and my friend Linda and I did a road trip around the beaches of Japan, and these are some of the photographs from there. And Japanese are a really quirky lot, and they love to bury themselves in the sand and create, and they build big penises and bosoms on, and it's just so funny, it's just hilarious. Okay, so what have I found out about myself through street photography? I've discovered abilities and powers that I never knew I had, and learned more about myself, and I continue to learn more. And what has street photography given me? It's given me joy. I've found out more about myself and grown as a person. I've explored places, met interesting people like everyone here today. I've found a real love and appreciation for people everywhere and all their little quirks and behaviours. And I've found out that people are pretty much the same the world over. They all want to be safe and happy. So yes, who I am influences what, why, and how I shoot, but photography has also changed me as a person. I've gained more confidence, realised I have powers I didn't know I had, met interesting people, seen interesting places, and have had fun in the process. And it has made my life more interesting. But my story is not unique, and you all share similar experiences. And through this shared passion, we have all grown as photographers and people, as we learn from the world we explore and from each other. So, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Very insightful. Vamos a tener una sesión de preguntas y
Por amor a la fotografía.
México Street Photo Fest, el Festival Internacional de Fotografía de Calle en México. Síguenos en nuestras redes sociales.
What a good photo is for